What's up everyone, it's a Knife Side here, and today I'm going to be doing a video talking about why I keep buying Spyderco knives. So if you've been watching the channel for the past couple of months, you've known that I've picked up a lot of Spyderco knives recently. I picked up the Native a while ago, which if you guys don't know, I ended up losing that one, and then I got the Sage 5 Lightweight, the Gayle Bradley 2, the Military, and then the Mannix. And so it really makes me wonder, like, why do I keep buying Spyderco knives? Because if you guys know me, I like to kind of venture out into all the different brands. It's not like I'm trying to get them all. It's just that, you know, sometimes a lot of different designs from different brands interest me. Sometimes when I keep buying from the same brand, it feels like I'm getting the same knife. But there are exceptions to that, like with Spyderco and with Chris Reeve knives. So on the topic of this, basically, I'm just going to be discussing why I think that I keep buying them, because Spyderco has their issues, and I've pointed them out in the past, but I will talk about the issues and what I like about almost all Spyderco knives. So something that has intrigued me with Spyderco is they have a lot of underrated models, and it's not really that all of them are underrated, it's just they don't get enough hype because they live in the shadow of knives like the PM2, the Para 3, and the Shaman, knives like that I think some of these other knives are a lot better than them. Now, I've never tried the Shaman, I don't really know about it, but I would say that on this table, the PM2 is my least favorite knife. Now, is it a bad knife? No, it's a very high quality knife, and it is a great and functional knife when you put it to use. But on this table, I think that the PM2 is my least favorite, and I think it's cool to see knives that are underrated within companies. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the Sage 5 Lightweight. And this is a knife that I feel like it would get so much more hype around it if Spyderco came out with different versions of it, because a lot of the negative hype it received at the start was from YouTubers saying that they were mad that it wasn't really that much lighter because it has full metal liners. Well, I really like the full metal liners. I like the build quality of this a lot more than on the Para 3. This one pretty much just has the half of a compression lock right here, or it's pretty much just the compression lock bar, I guess, and that's the only liners on it at all. It's kind of like the copper PM2, but and it only has one washer in it. So the Sage 5 Lightweight has a much higher quality build than the Para 3, and I feel like that this one's only in the S30V and black FRN version, and I feel like that FRN colors, we've seen Spyderco do tons of different ones with knives like the Delica, so I don't really understand why they couldn't do more with a knife like this. I feel like, you know, someone's like, okay, I want the Sage 5. It would be nice for them to be able to pick maybe a blue color or a gray color. I don't really know. And also, I think Spyderco should do some sprint runs with this model, because I mean, they're doing one with the Sage 1 in Maximat, so that kind of gives me hope that they'll do some with the Sage 5. But I mean, I feel like this with, I don't really care if it'd be FRN or G10, but with a souped up blade steel, I feel like that would make people buy this to try the blade steel and then realize how good of a knife this one actually is. This compression lock is very well tuned. It's about 15 thousandths behind the edge, which is pretty good for a Spyderco. And the fit and finish is great. The ergonomics are so much better than, or not so much better, but the ergonomics are better than the Para 3 Lightweight, in my opinion. So I would suggest, if you're looking for a smaller sized EDC knife, the Sage 5 Lightweight is very underrated, and I would highly suggest it. And so, like, getting the Sage 5 Lightweight kind of inspired me to look at more Spydercos that would fall into that underrated category, which then prompted my interest in the Gayle Bradley 2. And this is a knife that I just feel like it is one of the most underrated Spydercos, also like the Sage 5, but I have seen this kind of picking up some steam, and a lot of people really showing how much they like this knife, and I bet it's because of how well this blade cuts. I mean, I've seen a lot of posts like, hey, I'm looking for a Spyderco that's a very good cutter, and this is the #1 knife I would recommend. It's a hollow grind. It's like 9 thousandths behind the edge. It's got it's the stock thickness, I'd say that's average, but the ergonomics are just very simple. You know, the ergonomic lines are nothing extreme, so it's very comfortable in the hand. This jimping here is not extreme. I could cut with this all day long, and if there's just like a bunch of cutting for me to do, this is a knife that I would grab to do it, just because it's very comfortable. You get a full-size knife, and you get a very well performing blade. And it's an M4 steel. Yes, it does have the carbon fiber laminate. You can get some aftermarket scales for this, but personally, I don't really see a problem with the carbon fiber laminate. And overall, this is a great and solid Spyderco, and I feel like it's one of the most underrated out there. A lot of people are drawn away because of this lock bar access here, but personally for me, if this is a user for you, that's not a real issue. And this action is very good as well, especially for just being on phosphor bronze washers. And so yeah, I'm really impressed with the Gayle Bradley 2, and it's probably my favorite Spyderco out here. And you are looking at the big boy in the middle, the Spyderco Military. And this is a knife that I was actually sent out for review by Idea, a longtime supporter of the channel. And there's really no better compliment or suggestion that I can give a knife than when I get sent a knife for review. I do all the reviews and stuff on it, and then I go ahead and buy it, because what that means is I am no way at all buying this for the channel. I don't really buy knives for the channel just because I don't make any money on this channel, and so I pretty much just buy knives that I want to buy and that I like. And so the Spyderco Military is one of those. You know, I can't really do much on this knife. I did a video talking about it because it's a Spyderco factory second, if you want to go check that out. But the Military is very underrated compared to the PM2. And one thing about the PM2 to the Military that I just don't understand is the ergos on the Military are much better, because if you look at these like G10 scales, there is no chamfering and absolutely no contouring. And I mean, maybe there's one like chamfer that's a millimeter wide or something, I don't know. But these to me are pretty much just cut out slabs of G10, while on the Milli, you have a very nice, a pretty big chamfer going all the way around, and the ergonomics are super good on this. A lot of people are immediately drawn away because of tip down. Don't be, because tip down, honestly, if you ask someone why they like tip up over tip down, you're not really going to get that good of an answer. Some people might say, well, ergonomics, it might affect that. With the Military, my hand is resting over this whole clip, not a single hot spot whatsoever in this grip, and it's just like, that's one of the excuses you'll hear. Another one could be, well, I'm just not used to it. And that, in my opinion, isn't really an excuse. Yeah, you probably aren't used to it, but you had to get used to carrying a knife anyway, tip up. And so you can just get used to carrying it tip down. And some people will come out with the amazing excuse of just saying, yeah, it's just bad. It's not good. I don't like it. And it's like, refer to my first question. What is actually bad about tip down? And it's actually better for the Military. Sorry for rambling about this, but I like to talk about this because imagine if this was a tip up carry. You would grab it out of your pocket probably like this, and then you got to flick it out. So you inch up, and then are able to flick it. When it's tipped down like it is, you pull it out, your thumb's right there, and you are ready to go. Sorry, the action is a little bit slow on this guy. Also, one thing that interests me about Spyderco is their locks, because if you look at this Sage 5 Lightweight is the only recent Spyderco that I've picked up that has a compression lock. And while the compression lock is a great locking mechanism, I think it's one of the best out there, I think that Spyderco does a great job with other locks. So like, look at these liner locks with the Milli and the Gayle Bradley 2. Both have a very solid lockup. The lock face geometry on the Military is actually radiused, as you can see there, which is pretty cool, and it's a very strong, very secure lockup that I just feel like these are two of the best done liner locks I've ever had. Yes, it does have a lock bar issue or lock bar access issue, but that's not much of a problem to me, and I feel like it doesn't really affect the strength of the lock. Also, with the Manix 2, my most recent pickup, this ball bearing lock really interests me because it's pretty much an axis lock, but it doesn't have the problem of the Omega springs breaking, which is really cool. And the axis lock is just very strong because I think it's just cool to just look at this lock here. So we have it, and basically, let me try and show this. As you can see there, here is kind of almost two sort of tangs. This tang is going to go there, and then this one, as you can see there, is going to go in front of this little lock bar here. You might be able to see this. So yeah, there it is coming through, and then the lock bar goes there. So keeping this from going down is this lock bar here, and then keeping this from going up is this kind of stop kind of bar thing up there. So this is a very strong locking mechanism. I really like it. You know, I'm still getting it broken, and so it's not the easiest to close and after a while my fingers are kind of sore, but I am just kind of letting it sit overnight like this, so it kind of breaks in that coil spring a little bit more. But overall, I'm very impressed with Spyderco's locks other than the compression lock. I feel like they do a great job with them, and I'd like to see more liner locks and frame locks out of them. Now, I know that the compression lock is their big seller, and a lot of people really like to play with it, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's also a strong lock. So I see why Spyderco isn't doing these other locks like liner locks and frame locks and stuff, which I mean, they still are, but basically what I'm trying to say is that Spyderco does a great job with locking mechanisms other than the compression lock, so I would like to see more locks like this. And imagine if the Shaman had this lock, this ball bearing lock, like you wouldn't have that issue. Pretty much every review I've seen on it says that the compression lock is a hot spot, and so that would pretty much go away, and it'd probably be a little bit stronger. I don't really know the toughness test. All I know is that both compression lock and the ball bearing lock are very good. And so basically, Spyderco, I do have my issues with them, like the burnt edge that they are still having. I really don't know if that's ever going to be fixed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when they use very high-powered machines and don't cool off the blades, there is fatigued steel at the edge. For example, this Sage 5 lightweight, I probably sharpened this 4 or 5 times, and I think that I finally got the fatigue steel off of there. And keep in mind, this sharpening that I'm doing on this, when I sharpened it 4 or 5 times, it's not like me just honing it or micro beveling it on a fine stone. I am completely dulling this knife and then going to the full coarsest stone, full grit progression that I usually do. And so I have removed some metal off of this knife, but to me it's worth it because you'd honestly cut cardboard with this and there would be a chip in the blade, and that means that it's a burnt edge. And a lot of people are like, oh, S30V is so chippy, but in my opinion, they're probably thinking that because the edge is a little bit fatigued on their knife. And so that's why I think that people would really benefit someone to get into sharpening. And honestly, when I started sharpening, that was when I kind of, I feel like my knowledge of steels just increased by so much, not from like a scientific standpoint, like I'm not talking like, I don't know, a steel nerd with saying all the different chemicals in the steels, but from a user standpoint. Because sharpening pretty much made heat treating and the HRCs, that made it so much more simple to me because I stopped caring about the numbers and I started caring about how it removes a burr, how fast it can form a burr, and basically how it sharpens. Because if you don't know, if you have a knife like this Hogue Deca with a pretty weak heat treatment on the 20 CV, you will form a burr and it's pretty hard to just knock off because it's kind of gummy, I guess you could say. It's just not the best at removing a burr because this is softly heat treated. So I would highly suggest getting into sharpening because you can deal with things like burnt edges, and you can really, I feel like heat treatment becomes less of a thing that sounds way too complicated for you. Because originally when I heard heat treatment, I was like, oh, this dude's just trying to sound smart or something. But after I sharpened, it really made me care more about it. And I'm not a guy who needs the longest edge retention holding knife that there ever is in the world, but I do like knives that sharpen up very well, and that's why I'm excited to try out some XHP. I haven't sharpened this because the previous owner did, but yeah, I feel like this is a steel that I'm going to love, and so I'm excited to try that out. If you're wondering about the burnt edges on my other 2 knives, the Gayle Bradley 2, I did not have... Or wait, no, I did have some fatigue steel on here, but I wasn't really noticing any chips. I think I got one very small kind of flat spot in the blade, but I noticed that the M4 really did not hold an edge very well at all in my use. And after I sharpened it a couple times, I was like, wow, this thing just keeps on cutting. And one thing that is nice about Spyderco is they are pushing a lot of steels that companies are too afraid to push. Now, you know, they do have some issues with it. Sometimes they're not heat treated as good as something like a custom maker would do, which that makes sense, at least to me. And it really is a cool way to get your hands on some steels that you never thought you would. Like M4, probably one of the best steels I have. XHP, one of the best steels I have. My native had 4V. That was a really cool steel. And if you're wondering about the burnt edge on my military, I haven't really used it enough to really find out, but I did just immediately sharpen this thing out of the box, and so I don't really know. I'm just kind of going to do that with all my future Spydercos now because I know that I don't know. I pretty much know that the edge is going to be burnt, so might as well not have to have a burnt edge in use and just get that fatigue steel off of there. Another thing I'd like to see Spyderco doing is making sure their grinds are even. Let me try and find one. I'm pretty sure this Gayle Bradley 2 might be slightly off. Sometimes when you look at the plunge grind right here, you can maybe see that it almost looks like it is ground more on this side than it is on this side. I hope that might show up, but that's just a little bit off center, so it's that might be a little bit tricky for sharpening. Also, I would like to see them kind of mess with their plunge grinds a little bit. You can see this one too. That looks a little bit off, but like especially on this military, as you can see, it isn't even sharpened all the way to the back. So when I get diamond files, I'm going to cut in my own choil there just because this is not even sharpened steel, so there's no real point in having that there. And I wish that they would do sharpening choils, but I know that they've said multiple times that, you know, you can just cut your own in and it nothing's really going to get caught in here when there is no choil, which I get it. But when sharpening freehand, it kind of is annoying because I usually sharpen the knife. Imagine this little set of bits is my stone. Instead of sharpening like this, I sharpen at a 45-degree angle about like this, and so sometimes I either won't hit back there or I'll maybe bump my stone with this ricasso area. And so if you sharpen like this, the lack of a choil isn't really that big of a deal, but the way I sharpen it is a little bit frustrating. And so that is really my gripes with Spyderco, but why I'm buying them is because I think that the ergonomics on these underrated, or on these models that nobody really pays that much attention to, are pretty underrated. And I also just am intrigued by the new steels they're producing, and they are grinding their knives, or at least in my experience, these Tai Chung knives are thinner than my other ones. Like I don't know if I said this, but the Gayle Bradley 2 is like 9 thousandths behind the edge. The Sage 5 lightweight's like 15 thousandths, but the Manix 2, the military, the Para 3, and the PM2 are all around that 20 thousandths behind the edge mark. So maybe in their Tai Chung factory, they're grinding their knives thinner. I'm not entirely sure, but that's going to do it for the video. I know it's kind of all over the place and random, but it was just me saying why I guess I keep buying Spyderco knives, why I like the company, and things that I also don't like about the company. So that's going to do it for the video. Here's a cool sticker. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.